Hello and welcome to the Peace is an Action Verb podcast. I'm here with Clare Adamson, who I have known for probably 5 or 6 years now, online in the world of Facebook, although I'm in California and Clare is in Wales. And Clare, I know you to be a farmer and a mom and a wife and just a wonderful woman, human being all unto yourself. And with that simple introduction, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Clare, and I live in West Wales in the foothills of the Preseli Mountains, in the River Valley near a river. Um, so recently, I speak with trees, and recently the trees asked me if to introduce myself in a certain way.
Mm.
And then recently, I've tried to speak to a tree without introducing myself that way, and I got a reminder, you haven't introduced yourself.
Mm.
And once they did, we had conversations. So I've been asked to introduce myself as my birth name is Clare Horton. My married name is Clare Adamson, and my medicine name is Bridie, Bringer of Light, of the O'Reilly clan of Ireland. Um, so, with that introduction, and as we started talking about, you introduced me to your acons before we started recording,
I
it felt
did.
right that I start with how the trees have asked me to introduce myself.
So
It's a very new thing for me.
the trees are basically asking you to give them the chronology of the various names that you've had that also speak to your family connections. I think is what I'm sensing of that. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say that accurate. That is truly accurate, and it reminds me of Pat McCabe came here to speak with us, and she introduced herself with all her generations going back. So I guess her people are very much in touch with the land
Hmm.
and nature in general. So it feels very much in keeping that I'm being asked as a woman trying to get back to her indigenous roots, and we're so cut off from them over here in this country,
Hmm.
that makes sense to me, that I'm being asked to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
beautiful
and it
and
feels like it's honoring.
honoring your roots. We use that word in the English language to describe our ancestry. And the trees are asking
Mm,
you to do that when they greet you as a way to understand who you are before they begin
mm,
to connect with you.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So thank you for that. This podcast is touching on many different subject matters, and one of them that weaves through various interviews here is family, and also the process of healing the family line. And trees are definitely front and center in these conversations of peace verbs, trees being peace entities in and of themselves. And so thank you for that. I'm also noticing, Claire, that you're bringing a grounding and a slowing down to this conversation, and I thank you for that too. And I'm seeking to harmonize with you in that way, and that is also a verb on this piece list. So, can you tell
Proper
us a little bit?
harmonize.
Yeah, harmonize. Like I've had coffee. It's morning over here. You are into your evening time, and so I'm bringing my energy like a little bit slower to match up.
Yeah, well, I'm at the end of the day, and I'm bringing cider. So
Cider, right?
mm, apples from the tree, fruit of the trees.
Beautiful. And I ended my day yesterday and started my day today with canning applesauce. Also from so
Ah,
you and I are in the same hemisphere, so we're both towards the end of summer, and so you have apples in your area. We have apple trees and pear trees here too, and so rather than letting the apples go down the curb, we live in a urban built out area, suburban area. So rather than letting them just be lost and forgotten and unappreciated, I gather them with the permission of my neighbor whose tree it is. from the ground, next to the cars, and clean them up and make applesauce.
Amazing. Well, the trees will surely appreciate you doing that because
She
they're fruit.
does.
Otherwise, they're like, well, what else are we doing? We're producing food, it's one of our major things. So please eat us.
Yes, yes,
Show honor that way.
she does. She does appreciate it, and not only does she appreciate it, but the trees in our yard. So this is the next door yard where she lives. The trees in our yard appreciate it too. Not even the fruiting trees, but the trees that know her. The camphor tree, we call it a bay tree, although that's not actually the name. But the other mature trees here say, "Yeah, thank you for recognizing, thank you for appreciating, thank you for honoring." Yeah. So, Claire, I don't think you've always been a farmer. Uh, can you tell us a little bit about your journey towards where you are at this point in your life?
Hmm. Where to start? Okay. So when I was at university, I did geography as part of my degree, and part of it was human geography.
Hmm.
And it was the first time really I'd been put in touch with the understanding of desertification and looking at how it is in Africa and how there are very big herds of goats, but goats are very important to the people. So as a Western person, we could go in and say, you need to not have goats
Hmm.
because they're destroying the environment and making it more desert-like. But the understanding was you can't go into that as a Western person who has no understanding of their culture because goats are a really important part of the culture. So I think it really opened me up to really starting to thinking about the environmental issues and the human connotations for that and the difficulty for finding solutions because there's so much you need to think about. It's not just a practical that way. Um, so I think it really opened my mind to environmental issues. And from about the age of 20, I was like, right, eventually I want to own land.
Hmm.
I want to be independent from, the grid. So I want to live off grid.
Hmm.
I want to have my own electricity, run my own water, grow my own food. Um,
So you had that vision
so
from
that's,
your early 20s, that
yeah. And
trajectory for yourself. Yeah.
so I didn't quite understand how that might happen and what that might look like. Um, so after that, I worked for a bit and then I worked for someone who was promoting solar energy,
Hmm.
renewable energy in the UK, and ended up, we lobbied the UK government to put in a solar grant scheme, which we got them to do. So I was involved in kind of activism at a kind of corporate level, if you like, which was
Mm-hmm.
inspiring. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Is it happening fast enough? Because it felt like hitting a head against a brick wall for a long time.
Sure.
And then I left London and then I got into healing work. And I thought, maybe through hearts and minds, I'll kind of help people change.
Hmm.
Um, and then what did I do? And then I met my husband and he was always into growing food. And I tried growing food at home and it was a disaster. But
That's actually
he'd been,
important. Sorry, can we pause on that for a moment, please? So,
yeah,
because
yeah,
one of the verbs, I didn't have it on your list, but it's, well, two of them: make mistakes and let go of being perfect and right. And so you have this dream that's been pulling you forward since you were a young adult, and you didn't know how it was going to work, but you knew that it was important. And so you tried. Your first try, it didn't work. So how did your heart take that
yeah,
in
the
that moment?
slugs at everything. The slugs at everything.
Slugs are
And
everything.
I actually
Oh,
went out, oh, I know. Oh my God. And I hate to say this, but I went out armed with a pair of scissors. And then I kind of was like, no, I can't, this can't be right. So I kind of gave up because I got distracted by other things.
yeah.
But then when I met my husband, he'd been doing it for a long time. So I learned from him. We had
Hmm.
an allotment. He had an allotment already. And then later we had an allotment together.
And so
So
an
I started
allotment.
learning.
sorry to interrupt you for a moment. So
Sorry,
for
an
those who speak
allotment.
British English, that's the same thing in American English as a community garden plot. So it's a piece of land that
Okay.
you rent or you are allowed by the local government to garden on. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were on a garden site that had maybe 40 plots.
Okay.
So it's about 30 meters long by about 6 wide. It's not very big.
Hmm.
But we grew enough food for us. And that's when I really started to understand, okay, so organic food's really important. So the taste between
Hmm.
normal shop bought food and organic was one thing. Then when you take a carrot out of the ground and you eat it right there and then,
Hmm.
it's another thing again. So I
So
was
much
so inspired. I
life,
was like,
right? It's like
wow,
it.
yeah,
The, yeah.
yeah, because it is still alive almost as you're eating it. So you're getting the full benefit.
Hmm.
Of course, we our allotment was a few miles from home.
Hmm.
So often it would take a bit longer before we got to cook it.
Hmm.
But I remember thinking, oh, the magic of being really close to where you grow. So now I have to walk 300 yards down the field and I can
Hmm.
pick my own vegetables and
Hmm.
they're being cooked within 10 minutes or eaten raw.
I think
So
I recall you saying that you don't have a refrigerator in your home. Is that still true?
we didn't have a refrigerator for a long time. Last year I was like, no, I'm fed up with things going off
Yeah.
because we are meat eaters and then we were
Right.
drinking milk and I was like, you know, I was throwing stuff away and I was like, no, we
Yeah.
really need to have a refrigerator. And when we've got this much produce coming up, because we grow organic veg for a living, so it's
Yeah.
not just our own plot anymore. It's
Yeah.
so having somewhere cool to put stuff is really important. So yeah, we've kind of made that jump to get a
And
fridge, but it's a very, very low energy fridge.
I do want to celebrate that with you for a moment too, because I think people struggle. I think so many of us struggle with this idea of all or nothing. So like you can either completely be off the grid and go back to the way that our ancestors were in the 1600s, let's say, where everything is done by hand and life is fully contained in its own rhythms. Or you can find some kind of marriage between the modern structure of life, the modern speed of life, and say, you know what, it's okay to introduce a refrigerator back into our life. We tried that, and yet finding your middle path, I I feel like that's how we make anything happen in this life, is to find that middle path. And so you're describing that it's not like you set your course on a middle path and you know exactly that's going to be linear. It's more like you meander this way, okay, that was a little bit too far, and then you meander back this way and somehow find that. So thank you for sharing that. uh,
Oh, you're most welcome. And that reminds me of like a river,
yeah.
the meander and the
Yeah.
kind of the mystery of life as well unfolding because we like to think, well, the patriarchy tells us everything's linear,
Yeah.
but it's so not. It's so not linear. It's cyclical. The seasons, the moon, the sun, um, life and death. It is, the apple's coming and then the blossom, then
Mm.
falling off, and then later you've got you know, the tree going into winter and then you've got the buds coming. So everything is cyclical. So I think what you're attending to there, yeah, you can set goals,
Mm-hmm.
but when you get there, sometimes you're like, oh, how did I get here? Because it's not been straight. It's been kind of like, it's been like this, like a river meanders to find its path. So I think it's really lovely and I think that's part of peace for me,
Mm.
is to just set a kind of goal, if you like, but then allow the mystery of life to help you find your way there.
Mm.
And it might not be in the way that you think, but it's the journey that's just as exciting as the destination. And you might find things that you never expected that you'd be doing. So, yeah,
Can you
I
give
think
us an
that's the beauty.
example
And I
of,
think a
of
surrender.
so surrendering? Thank you. So there's allowing the mystery of life, there's surrendering. And sorry, I
Mm.
got excited because you were saying something that I jumped in before you were finished. Can you give us an
No, no,
example
no.
of something that happened that you didn't expect, that was like you were allowing the mystery of life to unfold, and then there was this this circumstance or experience or gift that arose that you found so beautiful?
Mm, wow. Well, I think maybe the first thing comes to mind, so I'm trusting that that's the right thing to be
Hmm.
led by. Um, the relationship before my husband ended up dreadfully.
Hmm.
Really bad choice. And when that one ended, I was like, right, um, if I'm going to find the man who's going to be the father of my kids, because I was in my mid-30s by then, I need to write a list of what I want and what I don't want.
Hmm.
So I wrote it all down. And 6 months later, I was actually invited to a party by a friend of mine who gate crashed. So I wasn't really invited. So she called me up at like midnight and said, come to this party. So I turned up at this party and I met my husband. And at the time, I wasn't really very interested, even though had this list. I was just like, I'd had a bad relationship and I wasn't really that open. But I met him and I was like, oh. And I looked in his eyes as I left the party. We'd had quite a few hours chatting. And the voice in my head said, this man's going to be really important to you.
Hmm.
And I was like, what does that mean? And then I bumped into him at a festival a few weeks later and my heart started going, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then he was talking to another woman and my heart went ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum in envy. And I was like, oh. And so, yeah, I guess it's like I never expected, even though I said what I wanted, I had not really expected it. I hadn't really been looking at that moment. And there he was. And actually, the remarkable thing was we'd both moved to Bristol in the same month. And we'd both moved to the same street in the same month and hadn't met for 3 years. So the
Really?
universe kind of put us there. Yeah. Yeah. So the universe had put us in the right place together, but we needed the flow of life to end up together. So yeah, I had no idea that I would meet my husband when I lived in Bristol. And, I hoped, but I never, so that's one example, I guess.
I
Um,
think if you, just to break that into components, because that is what I that is what I'm doing here with these podcasts,
mm,
is you set some intentions. So you had an experience where you said it was a poor choice. So that gets back at that piece verb of make mistakes, let go of being perfect and right, and even another one
mm,
which is try. You tried with this other man, and then you learned more about what was disharmonious for you, and then you got
mm,
clarity. So you involved your brain and you said, I need to use a very logical process of identifying for myself, what do I want and what do I not want. And so you made the list and then you set it
mm,
aside. So you set intentions and then you let them go, and you allowed with your heart to be open to life's mystery. And then you also you paid attention. So you said yes. You had this like random invitation at midnight, which is probably a time where most of us are like, oh, I think I'm going to call this day finished, right? So you said, okay, I'll get on my clothes, I'll leave the house, I'll remember to lock the door, I'll whatever it was that one does at midnight to be still awake. And you said yes, and then you noticed, and you looked in his eyes. There's so many piece verbs here, right? And you continued to notice. So,
yeah.
and then I'm assuming that you also acted on that because he's now your husband. He's not just that guy that lived on the same street in Bristol for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's quite a lot that you've said there. I think intention, I think it's so important in so much of life. Whether it be manifesting, whether it is how you want to meet the world. Like I wake up and I set my intentions for the day and I ask
Ah,
spirit for help.
yeah.
So I think intention is the crux of a lot of my life, I think. And I think it is really important to hold intention and to speak it out loud,
Hmm.
because then the universe knows
So
that's
the voicing,
what
the
you want to happen.
actual, so you set your intention, but you speak it out loud. Do you do that in the morning to yourself? Do you get up and say,
Yeah,
this
I do.
is,
Yeah.
so you're also
Yeah.
getting at ritual, the holding of
Yeah.
simple ritual, and that there's a cycle. You mentioned cycles, so to live with cycle perhaps is another way of saying. So every morning on a new day, you have a simple ritual of going inward, going upward. You're talking about spirit, asking spirit for help, going within, setting intention with your voice. So there's an outward action, or your whatever your vocal cords do when you push air across them.
Yeah.
Somehow brings that more into reality, or blesses it. What does it do?
I think to vocalize it makes it not be in your subconscious, it's kind of out in the world. And somehow that verbalization, that witnessing of the universe, and I also do it to the ground as well. I kind of call up to the sky and I touch the ground and the earth and I ask for that too. And it's kind of part of my honoring practice. Um, and lost my thread a little bit. Yeah, so I think speaking it or writing it is really important. And the clearer you can be, the better. So with going back to the relationship that didn't work, before him, I wrote a list of what I wanted, but I didn't write what I didn't want.
Oh,
So
fascinating. Look at that.
yeah, so it's the clearer you are on both aspects, the light and the dark, if you like. I don't really like light and dark, but both sides of the coin,
Sure.
positive, negative, or yin yang. Um, yeah, so that was my learning. Yeah, I think it's really important to make mistakes. You've got to try because that's the way you learn, right?
Right.
If you don't make
Right.
a mistake, you kind of in this try to be perfection, and it's like, well, you know,
It's
what do
paralyzing,
you
isn't
really
it?
you got to make? For me, it's like, yeah, to make life as rich as possible, just try these things, step out in the world, and if you fall off flat on your face, then just get up, brush yourself off, have a good laugh, and get on with the next one.
Ah, so
Just like,
you're
okay,
using
so what
humor
is the silver
too.
lining in that?
Sorry, I got
Oh
excited and
yeah,
started talking
absolutely,
again. So you were
really
saying,
important.
so I got excited. You were saying you fall down, you get yourself up, you brush yourself off, and you have a laugh. And then what were you just saying right after that?
Yeah.
So there's humor.
Oh, I
So
just
that's
think it's really important to have a laugh. Oh yeah,
yeah.
I think it started out of a like, if I laugh first, then everyone's laughing with me rather than at me.
Okay, fair enough.
Um, and I think it's joyful, isn't it? If you can laugh and not take yourself too seriously, which I did for a lot of my life. Just laugh, it's just like it makes you feel amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
kind of laugh, it just gets your whole system feeling great. And I think partly gratitude does that as well. It's a real resource that keeps you buoyant. So it's like that life jacket, if you fall overboard and you're not wearing a life jacket, then you sink, don't you? But if
Yeah.
you have a buoyancy vest, which speaking gratitude or having humor can breathe air into that, so then you're kind of bobbing on the surface. And then you're able to face into the ocean of, whatever it is that you're facing because
Oh
you've
my
you've
goodness.
given yourself a buoyancy.
I love that, and
Yes,
what
but
you don't
that's
know is that a guest, Fran Andre, who you may also know, was a guest last week, and Fran was talking about being surfing on the ocean, and so Spirit is giving us this connection thread between that conversation and this conversation of that ocean of overwhelm, and what is she was talking about surfing on
yeah.
that, and you're talking about rising up in that with a buoyancy, and that the buoyancy could be the gratitude, the buoyancy could be the
Mm,
humor, and not taking yourself too seriously,
mm,
and and thank you,
yeah.
that's beautiful, and also somehow connected to the beginning of this conversation talking about desertification. And so if desertification
Mm,
is removing the water from a place, and then we have this concept of the ocean, and somehow they're they both describe extremes of a situation, like all of the water or none of the water. And one of the verbs that I feel is so important to peace, and I've been really working at this and also listening with this, is what is it about polarities? And when I started, I'm going to show you if I can here. So when this project started, it was a list of verbs that were coming to me almost out of the air, and I was writing them down or carving them out of paper
Okay.
and then putting them on this wall. And polarities came first as rise above polarities, but I then became more aware that to say rise above is a polarity in and of itself that only includes one half of that equation. So why just rise above? Why not go down or out or in? And so you're also giving us another tool for the play with polarities. So you said, you started, you set your intentions with a list of positive attributes, but you didn't set your intentions with a list of negative attributes, and somehow they were both important. So I am going to
Mm.
ask you if you agree, or maybe you have something to add to this. Is it maybe play with polarities? Like there's polarities the noun, but there's some kind of a piece verb that is involved here.
Well, for me, it's about balance. You've got the scales, the Libra
Balance.
scales, haven't you? So,
Yeah.
um, and also, um, it's actually an imagery that Claire Dubois of Tree Sisters gave me. She's about these pendulums that swing backwards and forwards.
Huh.
So you could stay here and you can swing to there and swing to there. And if you only swing to here into the negative and the grief, then you only swing to there in the joy. So if you swing all the way up here into the negative, into the grief, into the murk, then that gives it all the way power to go back. So for me, if you live only in one realm, you don't get that. So it's really important to kind of have both to keep that balance in life. And obviously, ecosystems are all about balance, and they are so intricate in how they keep that balance. And nature is brutal. Kind of is brutal. You just kind of see what certain wasps do. They kind of lay their eggs in other creatures, and then the larvae come out of it. That's pretty gruesome, right?
Or
Um,
or slugs can decimate your vegetable harvest, right? I mean,
yeah,
with their slow and slimy taking over of the
yeah,
world.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. But
yeah,
then there's
it's
things to do to kind of bring more of a balance. So probably the predators come because there's a lack of balance. So,
right.
for instance, in our polytunnels, we had a lot of black fly on our chard. It decimated it. I had to cut it all out because we couldn't sell it because it was covered. And then we started getting the ladybirds in, and
Yeah.
they start eating the aphids.
So you were
So
watching this progression. So it started with two, like we would call it infestation. We like to use that word when we
yeah,
talk about insects or invertebrates.
yeah,
But then the
yeah,
predators followed the prey, right?
yeah, yeah,
And could
right.
could
So you've got that balance.
so in terms of the balance of a farmer, so you and your husband, and there's a bit of a story gap here. Hopefully, we'll go back to that. But let's fast forward in time
Mm,
to present, where you actually have purchased a piece of land and you are farming and you are making your living with this. So, in terms of balance, you've got polytunnels, which I understand to be uh, like a sort of greenhouse where you can regulate temperature and moisture and uh, keep your vegetables growing through the cooler seasons in Wales.
yeah, right.
So, do you have to think about, well, we can grow this much chard, but we also have to grow this much of this other crop, and maybe how many different crops you have to consider having so that your livelihood is not riding on that chard, which you couldn't sell because uh, we haven't gotten to the point of consumer acceptability to sell vegetables that have quite a lot of hangers on of the insect family, right?
Right. Right. So that points to two things. Number one, I have people come and work for me and they say, well, can't I put that in the harvest? So I was like, if it was for our table, absolutely.
Yeah.
But for selling it, no, because we sell to a wholesaler and then he sells on. So, people aren't going to do it. And I know there is a kind of a theme in this country that they kind of sell what they call it wonky veg. So it's like carrots got two like prongs on the end or a different bit, different misshapen or something. So it's starting
Right.
to come into psyche, but yeah, that's quite tricky. So yeah, as growing food, it's quite a complicated crop plan that is on a rotation as well. And I leave that to my husband because he's done it for a long time and he really knows the stuff. So
Okay.
I would get lost in the overwhelm on that because it's quite a mammoth task to get it right.
Right.
So yeah, it would be like, so if we're growing chard there next time, you wouldn't want to grow chard again. You want to grow something else that
Mm-hmm.
complements, because chard
Mm-hmm.
will take a certain thing out of the soil. So you want
Right.
the next thing to not take the same thing,
Right.
essentially. So yeah,
You're like,
and also having many different crops means that you're resilient and adaptable. So if the chard doesn't work, we've got kale outside to sun them instead, or we've got,
mm-hmm.
if the chard inside the polytunnels doesn't work, then we've got chard outside that's coming
Mm-hmm.
on, so that'll be ready in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, diversification also is a kind of word that farmers, or I wouldn't class myself as a farmer, as kind of
Mm.
a grower more, because I
Okay.
don't have animals, don't have
Oh.
arable. Um,
Oh.
but we do have an orchard, cider orchard,
Mm-hmm.
that we've planted, and we do have kind of rhubarb going in, and we've got kind of, we want to have herbal lays, like say herbal, say like mint and
Mm-hmm.
comfrey and all those
Mm-hmm.
kind of things grown in the orchard as well. So we've got all these kind of layers,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got soft fruit. And also in a permaculture context, you want layers. Or forest garden, you've kind of got your tree layer and you've got your herb layer and you've got everything in between.
Wow.
So instead of like just being acreage this way, you've got acreage that way too,
Oh,
if you
wow.
like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you might
It,
have your trees one higher up, and then you'd have your soft fruit, which is like red currants, black currants. Then you might have your comfrey, and then you might have your mint.
and you have to
That's
plan this out by like what your husband is thinking about in terms of nutrition in the soil and replenishing the soil, but also sunlight exposure. So, you know, if you have a
yeah.
tree, the tree is going to bring a certain amount of shade. So, understanding in that kind of garden, who doesn't need so much sun and who is happy with a little bit of understory dappled light rather than
Mm,
full on middle of the field. I'm a tomato and I'm going to get as much sun as possible kind of a
yeah,
kind
right.
of a crop.
And I think
Yeah.
you can learn a lot of that from going into natural spaces. You
Mm.
see what kind of happens in a young forest, or eventually it'll everything will go to forest, and it'll be, the light will be cut out for the younger things. But yeah, and I think that's what permaculture really tries to do, is kind of look at nature's systems and kind of try and mimic it, if you
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a way to get the most out of the most food production, I guess you can. And a lot of the permaculture things, it's perennial plants, so it's not just the annuals that
Right.
are, you know, that you're planting and having to take the seed and plant and make plugs and you grow on. So a
Right.
perennial garden will just keep giving year after year after year if you do it right. And it's also about, okay, so if I'm going to put woodland in, woodland trees, then while there's light, I need to put an understory, and then the trees will grow up to a certain point, and then you can coppice the trees, so then it gives more light to the understory, and then they kind of take. So it's this kind of like ongoing process that is not just over 1 year. What's that indigenous way of saying looking at 7 generations ahead? I think that
Mm.
comes from an
Mm-hmm.
indigenous place in the States, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it? So the idea that you're not just looking for now, you're looking way ahead. So, the trees we're planting now, we're thinking about our sons' children
Right.
and their children. So, yeah, I
Right.
think that's another kind of piece verb, isn't it? Like kind of thinking
It
about
is
the
thinking
resilience
ahead.
of your future generations.
Thinking of the resilience of the future generations is absolutely a piece verb, and it's also getting at
Mm,
the way we started this conversation, which is that trees ask you to introduce yourself by your lineage, by your full lineage, by all of your lineage. And so you're also thinking about, can I live my life? Can I live my day? Can I live my seasons with that continuity in mind? And so you're coming back.
yeah,
You mentioned you're seeking to come back to your indigenous roots, and you mentioned that that's a struggle and a disconnect for you in the UK, and yet, I have some English blood. I have some Ukrainian blood. I don't even know what I have one half California surfer dude blood, and we don't know him, so that could be anything. And that's a story in and of itself. Um,
Yeah.
But all that to say, like I have a certain degree of wistfulness about the ability to be close to the actual soil of my ancestors, and that you are closer to the actual soil of your ancestors. Although you mentioned Ireland, and now you're in Wales, so that's not, the exact same mountain range or river where your peoples are from. So at any rate, I think we're all looking for that, and so you're talking about a ritual of setting intentions with your voice at the beginning of the day, but then you also mentioned that you touch the ground and you reach up to the sky, and so in addition to the permaculture where you're thinking about how do I how do I set my activities today as a grower, and how do I set my activities this year as a grower and next year as a grower that thinks about the 7 generations ahead. Can you tell us a little bit about the blessing and the invocation that hands on the ground and the hands to the sky is, and how that relates to all of this?
So what going back to the story about how I became to be a grower, my husband and I ended up in France working for a couple who'd bought an old chateau and they wanted people to kind of develop their gardens. So I was really reluctant but really excited. So we went anyway. And the thing that really came out of that was as I gardened and spent time to the earth, my awareness of life went like, I was like, oh, look, there's a little beetle. Oh, look, there's a little butterfly. Oh, look, oh, look.
Mm-hmm.
So I was much more aware of the more than human world that I hadn't
Yes.
really been in touch with. I lived in a city and kind of a fast life. And even though in my mind I wanted to kind of be much more in touch with the environment, it wasn't till I actually started growing that
Hmm.
my spiritual awareness, my love of Gaia, if you like, really came into its own. Um, so I think the things are really interconnected.
Hmm.
And I think there's on one side there's the practical environmental movement,
Mm-hmm.
and the other hand there's the kind of more earth connection stuff, and they're almost separate, but they need to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, we've got the very practical side of growing food, but then it's really the honouring of the life that really feeds into why we're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Why we wanted to grow organic food, because we feel like, okay, there's a way of that's going in our society that I'm not really very happy with. So instead of fighting that, I'm going to try and create a new reality. So
You
Joanna Macy
are.
talks about
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm listening.
go on. So Joanna Macy talks about the three parts of activism. So there's the holding action, which is all the kind of activism, the marches and the kind of direct action stuff, which
Hmm.
is really vital. And then she
Hmm.
talks about the kind of coming up with new solutions, so renewable energy, local currency, organic farming, regenerative farming. That's the kind of second. And then the third one is consciousness shift.
Hmm.
So I feel I'm like in the kind of those two realms of like creating a new alternative, presenting new alternative solutions and living that, and really having the kind of the consciousness shift that is needed to then bring value and remind me, if I love nature, if I love something, I'm going to want to stand up and fight for it, aren't I? So if I'm not connected to it, then I can't really love it. So I think those two things are really, really important. And I think all three stories need to be melded a bit more. So I think the activism bit, almost, I know activists who are like, oh, you've got to be at the front line, pushing, 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 all this stuff. It's not
Hmm.
important. Well, all of
Hmm.
it's important. And
Hmm.
we've all got to find our place. And I've done the activism bit, but I'm not there now. I'm kind of in the other bits. So back to the prayer that you
Hmm.
asked me. So also inspired by Pat McCabe, she kind of calls us the five-fingered ones.
And we should
So I
we should
raised my hand.
explain Pat McCabe.
Who Pat McCabe is? Okay,
Yes,
so Pat McCabe is
amazing
a woman of
teacher.
indigenous wisdom, an amazing teacher of
Yes,
Navajo and Diné descent, who
I
lives
think
in
she's
New
also
Mexico.
Lakota Dene. I think, right.
Yes, I think she's
Yes,
Lakota Dene. Sorry, I've got that wrong. Yes, she is.
and she lives in New Mexico.
Amazing wisdom keeper. Yeah, lives in New
Yeah.
Mexico, and she ccame to Wales. Well, I've heard her speak many times online, and the trees actually said invite her to Wales, and I was like, okay, what, me? And they're like, yeah, you.
and
So
so
I
getting
kind
back
of
to like This is the first time acorns have said, I have to meet your conversation guest today. So anyhow, the tree's called Pat, and you said, okay, I will be the
Yes.
conduit of that invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to the prayer. So I say, hello, I am five-fingered one, and
Oh,
I honor
oh,
so much gratitude for the light that you bring us. Without you, we would not have life on this planet. And then I go down to the earth and I put both my hands on the soil and I say humble gratitude for your how do I say it? It's like I say it every day, and then when I'm asked to say it, something about your kind of your life-giving nurturing. Without you, there would be no life. And to you, I lay myself in service. Help me to be in service to you in the best way that I can. And so that's kind of the prayer, really. And it also ties into the trees have said to me, this is another story, but the trees have said to me um, that they want me to be an ambassador for life. So that's why the trees speak to me, and I need to speak their words. And I have the words, and I haven't had the courage to speak them into the wide world until now. But yesterday, they really said to me, "These are our words, not yours. This isn't your right to stop them. You need to speak them. So get over." So I've reached another kind of level of like, okay, another stripping of the layers back to kind
yeah.
of be in service
Good. Thank you.
in the best way I can.
Absolutely. And here I am adding some more distribution to that communication. It,
Mm,
and some more mycelia network, is another reminder of life that comes up again and again with
yeah,
conversations like this that are nonlinear, and
yeah,
that we are
yeah,
making
quite.
like points of connection. And
Yeah,
so 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 I'm going to take you back a few threads because I want to celebrate an awareness that you're sharing with us, because it's just so beautiful and important. And that is that you said when you started to garden, your awareness opened. And then you noticed the ladybird, we say ladybug over here. You noticed the ladybird, you noticed, the butterfly, these other beings in your midst. And so the simple act of being, the peace verb of being in presence with the garden, with the earth, then opens the awareness. And then I'm also hearing you greet. So greeting is a peace verb. Hello, ladybird. Hello, butterfly. So you're greeting I'm going to use the word brethren because I can't think of a better substitute right now, but our relations that are not five
good
fingered.
word.
Yeah. And so then you're also
Yeah,
talking about, so you were in the garden in France, your awareness is opening, and now moving ahead in the timeline to you're now gardening, and the chard is a feast party for the black fly, and they are so excited to have found this abundant crop that is now their like annual party of like, we're going to eat, we're going to lay our eggs, we're going to celebrate the continuation of our family. And then, but that was too much. And then the ladybirds come in, and ladybirds are beetles of a certain variety that are predators, and then they help balance it out. And so you're also then talking about thanking Father Sky, Mother Earth. And you're wearing that shirt, aren't you? The one from Cali? Yes, I have
yeah.
that shirt.
Ah,
Yeah. So Callie is going to be a guest later this week. Um,
how
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. So you're thinking, and you're asking, how can I be of service to all life? I am Claire, one of the five fingered. How can I be of service to life? Father Sky, Mother Earth, and and then thinking about the goats at the beginning of the story and the Western peoples at the beginning of the story wanting to drive, or maybe there's too many goats, or maybe Westerners think we have to solve this problem. And then I'm just noticing what you're doing is you're taking a step back from being important, or to say more important. Not that you're not important, but it's about, okay, humans, how can we take a step back and celebrate that the black fly and the black fly's people is having a fiesta on the chard, and to have resilience and diversity in your garden, in your growing beds, is to allow for that. So if we were to say all goats all the time, only goats, well, then the desert sets in. And yet, if we are to say we have 20 different crops, we thoughtfully, with our mind, we've thoughtfully observed and arranged the rotation and the groupings so that we can serve thriving life and allow for the fiesta that happened on on the chart. And that is such a different way of thinking, and perhaps is that part of the answer of coming back to indigenous, to the connection of you to your ancestors, and to the connection of you to your how do we say, progeny, the ones that come after, the generations ahead.
Well, I think so, because if I think back to my ancestors, they were so connected to the land because they had to be. That was their
Yeah.
pure survival.
Yeah.
And I think we're divided away from that awareness in the Western world anyway. We just go to the supermarket, or we buy it online, or we just get it.
Hmm.
We're not, some kids like say, where does milk come from? Supermarket. Well, no, it
A
comes from a
plastic jug.
cow that,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So I think connection back to nature and the remembering that we are nature, in fact, we're not this separate entity, we are part of it.
Hmm.
That is the biggest kind of lie that we're telling ourselves, that we're separate from it, that it doesn't have, we can't just destroy this bit, and then we can't take ancient forest down and then plant these saplings and think it's the same thing.
Right.
It's kind of not.
Right.
But and when we separate ourselves from nature, I think that's our way home, to kind of remember ourselves as nature, because there's a tree outside. I'm breathing an oxygen because of that tree. I'm
Yes.
alive because of that tree, and he's
And
alive because of me, because I'm
that's right.
breathing out the carbon dioxide that they need.
Carbon dioxide. Yeah.
Cyclical. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The
So I can never say the word. Reciprocity. Reciprocity, is that the right
recip-
word?
reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Recip-
Reciprocity. Yeah.
yeah.
A really hard
Yes.
word, but that thing, yeah, I think it's really important to kind of understand that kind of giving and taking. So offering things. So with the trees, when I ask for their wisdom, I make an offering to them, and I ask them what it is that they wish for. And I've only just recently come to a point. I went to a talk last week, and she was talking about how, like, Pat's people, there are certain peoples of the world that would leave tobacco as an offering. So I hadn't been doing that. And apparently it was that they would leave barley or oats as an offering, but I really tuned in, and they said they want mugwort
What
left
is
as an
mugwort?
offering.
Mugwort is some sort of
So
herb? Mugwort is an herb?
mugwort is a herb. It's mugwort. It's Artemis. So it's kind of a moon, from the moon kind of. It's the dream kind of herb. So it's used to kind of help people work with the dream world. So I think it grows in the States as well, but it's definitely a native herb to here. It's kind of really tall spikes, leaves on it. Yeah, and it's really a woman's herb as well. It can help with reproductive issues, kind of moon issues. So yeah, it's a plant that I really want to have, and I planted some. So yeah, it's asking that I kind of lay that down as I go to a tree, and then name myself. And then so there's this kind of idea of, I'm bringing a gift. I'm not just taking from you as a plant. And also when I harvest, to try and, I don't always remember, but to try and ask the plant and thank them for their, what they're giving me. And then ask their help. And then when they've given me their wisdom, to say, what would you like me to do? So one tree said, can you clear around me and come and have picnics with me? And another
Yes.
one was like, can you take down this bough here because it's really old and it's dead and it's weighing down?
Yeah.
And another one said, please take my medicine, take the berries and make medicine out of me. So
It is a different answer every
yeah, it's
time.
about this kind of two-way.
And in the same
Yeah.
way that if I were to ask you, or if your husband, your son, and you were all in the same room right now, and I would ask each of you, how can I serve you or honor you? I would get a different answer from each of you. And if I were to ask you that same question
Hmm.
3 hours later, I may get yet another set of three different answers. And I think we get tangled up and
Right.
confused and overwhelmed when we think about asking trees or asking plants those questions, because we think, well, is it going to be a complicated answer? How will I know if I can hear them? And yet, if we just kind of, again, don't take ourselves too seriously, try, make mistakes, learn, laugh, we get closer to that rhythm and that ability. I'm thinking I've asked some similar questions lately, and it's the beginning of well, it's fruit season right now, and we have a Persian king mulberry in the backyard, and my husband's family is Persian, and so this is
Mm.
a very important tree for all of us, for the extended family. And so when I started picking berries, I asked mulberry, what can I give you in reciprocity? And mulberry and silk oak, who is next to mulberry, said, will you come and meditate with us tonight? And I went out and I realized that there was some heavy energy that had collected in that space, and then I was able to help them clear the heavy energy. And then, so that was a couple months ago, and yesterday, when I
Beautiful.
asked Mulberry what Mulberry wanted, Mulberry said, I just want you to come play. Will you come play with me? Will you climb in my branches and can we play together? And it was very similar to how when you have a dog friend and the dog friend hasn't seen you in a little while and they get so excited to play with you. That was what Mulberry needed
Yeah.
yesterday. Such a different
Oh, beautiful.
request,
Beautiful.
right?
Well, yeah, well, they're just, well, they are beings. They're not static things. We might see, well, they just stand there in one place, don't they? But they're
Ah,
way more than that. I mean, you look to an
yeah.
old tree and well, how many lifetimes have they seen? How many stories can they tell you?
How many human
And that's the
cycles?
thing I
Yeah.
love about trees. Yeah, well, Beech particularly, this is what she's told me. She's one that really stands for the ancestral wisdom and really is connected. But all of the trees hold all the ancestral DNA wisdom. So it might be the mother tree had an experience, but the younger one gets to know about it. It's like with humans, we have that, um, genetic memory, isn't it? That gets passed down through the DNA. What I'm trying to think what the theory is called.
Well, I've experienced it
Uh,
firsthand.
Bruce.
I don't know how to describe it with my
Yeah.
brain, but I can tell you that different parts of my body have held memories that I have released or had released in body work sessions. And then all of a sudden, I'm with my
Mm.
great grandfather, the rabbi, who's fleeing the pogroms, or I'm with and I've mentioned these two actually the other day in a different podcast, or in my other knee, there's my grandmother who's annoyed and just wants to have a martini, so like there's memories that come up in different parts of the body that we can experience. And I've also noticed as an adopted person, so I have a different family that raised me than gave birth to me, that I actually have access to both lineages. So to all, I guess that's what,
Mm.
eight lineages. So there's something about the energetics as well as the physical, the DNA that the body holds. The body holds the energetics, and we have access to that wisdom and that
Yeah, so it's
knowledge.
epigenetics. That's the word I was looking for. Epigenetics is the experience that gets passed on. They've done lots of research about that. But yes, it's like not through the blood, but through the experience that you were raised within. You were raised within the experiences of two people who had their
Yes.
experiences of life and through the families, isn't it? So it might be stuff that their great great grandmother had an experience of that coloured how she taught the next generation about certain things and so on and so on. So I'm
Yes.
sure Carly
Yes.
and you will have very interesting conversations about
I'm
that. So I
sure we
think
will.
I'll leave
Yeah.
that kind of thing to her. But yeah, she's doing a lot of powerful work around the ancestry and the witch burnings and stuff. So yeah,
She is.
um,
She is.
and the
I also,
trauma that is held in our collective consciousness, all around the world.
and coming up
So
for healing
yeah,
and coming up for healing in this time in these days, and I want to say thank you. I want to express gratitude to you for your courage, to you and your husband for your courage in taking yourself from allotment to hired help in France to gardeners or growers in Wales, that you have
Mm.
allowed for that journey, had the courage for that journey, uh, gone through the trials and challenges of seeing this to where you are right now in a way that you can send your your vegetables are, I believe, also ambassadors in the way that your trees are asking you to be a voice. Your vegetables are going out into homes and being
Oh, that's
consumed.
beautiful. Love that. Thank you. That's really beautiful.
You're
I'd
welcome.
not thought about that before. That they're going out in service and they're feeding people's bellies.
They
And
are.
actually,
They
that
are.
love that we put into the food is actually going into them.
Yeah.
How exciting! That's a whole new realm. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's
I'm
that's quite
surprised you hadn't
amazing.
actually, been noticing that
No,
already.
just hadn't.
Wow.
That's that kind of linear kind of
Yeah.
thing, like another layer.
Yeah.
Oh, um,
Yeah. And
how
so
it,
that
yeah, that is very exciting.
and how you become, you were talking about that carrot, like the first carrot that you pulled out of the ground and ate right then and there. The carrot now lives on in you, and the carrot is now a part of you.
Mm,
And so all of those vegetables are now integrating into other human beings, other five fingered human beings. And so to
mm.
bring us back into
Right.
that
Well, mm,
cycle, that commune, that awareness of being of this place, of the alchemy of
mm,
earth and sky, and the sun and the earth, that we are of this place.
mm. Well, that's beautiful. I'm going to bring a lot more ritual to my growing of food now. Now you've said that. And that's given me such inspiration to think, okay, because sometimes when you get caught up in the humdrum and everything, you think, am I really having any positive impact? But you've given me a whole new level of understanding of it. So that is gold.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And I want to say thank you for your courage.
Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm having this moment in time in my life where my gestation period for this business has been about 15 years. And I was realizing there's an
Ah,
analogy of some stillbirths and some miscarriages along with that process. And I've never been a human mother, but in being a mother birthing this effort, I I left a high paying job in 2018 to launch and then sold nothing of the product I was trying to launch, and then got hired back to I took the first job that I got offered and have been working part time in what has, you're talking about how you open up to life and then life brings you what you need. The experience has been phenomenal and so healing in so many ways. And yet I'm at this point in time where I'm either going to go back to work full time as an environmental scientist because I need to financially, or I somehow find this balance between this entity that I'm bringing into being of Converge Forward. And so you and I are having a conversation in this magical 6 month window of permission that I've given myself to try.
well, amazing for having the courage. And you are setting your intention and opening to the mystery, aren't you? The
Yes,
magical mystery tour of life, as the Beatles say. Well, I'm
exactly.
not sure they said it like that, but you know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think the world really needs people who are willing to take that step into the unknown and really follow their passions and what they feel is what their calling is. And it's not easy. It's really not easy, given that we need to pay for our bills and buy our food and or grow our food, all those things.
And so just
So
Claire, because you
yeah, I
have,
think it's really important.
thank you. I think it's important too, but I have this important question to ask you about that, which is, you were in the garden, so I able at that point, you weren't a parent yet. You and your husband were able to work for probably not a whole lot of money in someone else's garden, almost like an apprenticeship. And yet, I'm sure that you have certain parameters that if we're going to make it work, we have to stay within this profit margin because that's what survival and not even just survival, but also wellness looks like. So to take care of your home, to take care of your family, you have to be in this window. Have you given yourself off ramps like if we can't do it, here's our plan B? Or I'm trying to, because I think a lot of people hear that mythology of beauty where oh, follow your dream, be true to your heart, be true to your calling. And yet to go from the place of being more in the mainstream to that place, there's got to be some kind of a middle path. Can you tell us a little bit about practicality in that way for you?
Hmm. Yeah. So for sure, we haven't really come up with a plan B.
Mm.
Um, we'll just follow this path and see how it evolves over time. Um, because actually we bought the land and we set up this project not with the intention to grow vegetables for a living, but to
Mm.
have be herb, sell herb and grow cider. But
Oh,
we
okay.
decided in the short term to bring in money because my husband was out working for someone else for really low money, doing really
Mm.
manual labor. And he's like, I could just do this myself and earn more
Right,
money.
right.
And then I was working on site at the time. So he's like, that would enable us to then both be here full time.
So you were part
So
time. So I think to answer the first part of that question is you
yeah,
had a job somewhere else that was providing a certain baseline of stability while you were also growing this project.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
you paid
for sure.
attention and saw other opportunities coming in. It's like, oh, we didn't set ourselves in the direction of vegetables, but look, here's an opportunity.
Mm, absolutely. And I think that's another thing. I went to a festival last weekend and they had a labyrinth and I walked through it and it said slow and flow and be open to changing direction. So I think that really speaks to that in that we have a kind of review practice that every year, every autumn, like
Hmm.
November time, we sit down and go, okay, how's it gone? Good, the bad, and the ugly. Are we
Mm-hmm.
actually doing the thing we want to be doing? Do we need to change? Do we need to adapt? So it
Okay.
evolves year on year in that cycles again.
So the
So
reflection. So there's a
yeah,
point.
I
There's a
think
point
that
of stopping and reflecting. So stopping, reflecting, taking stock. That's all part of the cycle of peace verb there. You don't just barrel ahead into year
yeah,
two, year three without you're actually stopping and
yeah,
asking yourself, okay, let's take a look around. That was a whirlwind of work. We did a lot of doing. Now, how does that look? Can we reflect on it?
yeah. And I think winter is a really good time for that. It's that
Mm.
kind of inward place. You've done the harvest
Mm.
and now you're kind of in the dark, kind of, looking back and then germinating new ideas, for the following year. So you need that rest, like trees, deciduous trees anyway. They go
Mm.
into where the leaves come off and they're in that sleep mode,
Mm.
aren't they? Recouping and recovering and getting ready for the next lot of leaf and plant and flower and apple and all those acorns and all those things to come out. So I think if we're to go back to the idea of mimicking nature,
Mm.
if we can kind of go back to mimicking nature, then that's our way home to belonging as well, because we are nature, we are part of the cycle. So that helps us kind of tune in to that level as well. But also for sure, it does take investment. Um, and I was lucky in that I had a house in Bristol that I owned.
Mm.
And because of the corporate work I'd done and help from my dad,
Mm-hmm.
um, so honour him and his support, then I was able to buy a house. And then we were able to sell the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the house for nearly 15 years, and the market went crazy around the time we sold it. So
Right.
we were very fortunate and we were able to generate funds in order to fund what we're doing.
Yes.
So there are people around us trying to do it on a shoestring, and it takes them years because
Right.
they've got to go out and work all the time to bring in enough money to buy the next bit of material to do the next stage of the house. So
Right.
we've got friends who've been building a house for 8 years
Wow.
and they're still not in it, and so For sure, it is a challenge. And I think one of the things I notice in that many folk that really want to live this alternative life, if you want to call it that,
Mm.
or a kind of life outside the mainstream that helps call us home to the fact we're nature and more in balance,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have a lot of money.
Mm.
So it makes it really challenging. So it's really hard to kind of find that. And then there are people just dedicated, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm
Mm.
just going to kind of live this life. So the kind of economic paradigm that we're kind of in does dictate to a certain degree what you can and can't do. And I thank our privileges every day
Mm.
that we're able to do this work. And so we don't just do it for ourselves, we do it for all those who wish to that can't.
Mm. So
And really hold that privilege, yeah, as a gratitude that we have that, rather than kind of
so there
feeling bad we've got
there's a
privilege and others don't.
sorry, I keep as I get so excited and I jump in before you're finished.
No, 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 go for it, go for it. No, no, no,
So,
it's
but
good. It keeps it flowing.
I'm like the little kid that's just had all the coffee this morning. Um, so what I'm hearing is that there's a ritual of prayer. So you're not just so you have taken the gifts that you have been given, and they have been tremendous gifts that have given you power to accomplish your goals and your dreams in a very um, embodied way. You had a house that was a physical piece of property that had a certain value, and that could be then transferred into a parcel of land. And so yet you're recognizing that privilege is a blessing, and yet it's not fair in the sense that that privilege is not available to all that have that dream and that heart and that will and that capacity to bring that healing to the earth. And so you are also mentioning a ritual of prayer in the expression of the gratitude. So again, it's a voicing. You're expressing the gratitude, and you're also expressing the intention on behalf of us as a human family to have healed economic systems that would allow that return for everybody that in their heart is called to that return.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold that thought. My battery just said it's about to go, so I'm going to get the charger. I'll be right back.
Okay, and I'm going to take a bathroom break. I will see you in just a moment, and then we can see what needs to be said to complete. I'll see you in a
Okay.
moment. Wow, well, that was a serendipitous break. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted.
Yeah, I can hear you. I've
Okay, good.
unmuted now, so I can come back. Am I back?
Yes, you're back. Yeah, and we can edit that little break out. That's easy
Good.
to do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah, people don't have to go on a break with us. Um, wow. So we were talking about the blessing of the opportunity and the prayer that you include as you recognize that opportunity. towards healing economic realities where anyone and everybody who has the inclination to work the land, to live with the land, to be in cycle with nature has that opportunity. And so there's something about, I just want to pause on the importance, and you were talking about this earlier, of setting intentions in your own life, but also setting intentions in all life. In all life.
Yeah. My intention is never only just about me.
Mm.
It's about, community or collective, or, it's looking outward, being of service in some way to the world. But it's that kind of micro macro thing, and that this is something the beech trees also told me, is that if I can attend to my own stuff in my own heart, then that can filter out, because the heart's connected like the mycelium of the trees. Us humans have the mycelium of the heart, if you like, the energy of the heart.
So you're
So if
sorry. I'm
I
going to have you repeat that because this is the only time that our internet connection has been a little fuzzy. I think you just said
ah,
the beech
okay,
trees said that human hearts have
beech
mycelia
trees.
of the heart in the same
It's
way that there's
yeah,
mycelia in the soil.
yeah. There is kind of energetic threads that come out from the heart to heart, so we can have connection to the heart. There's been a lot of studies about the electromagnetic and the kind of energy that comes out from the heart. So the beech tree said, like trees have mycelium networks, so humans have heart to heart networks. So heart is net, if you like.
This
Um,
is
so
Claire. Just a moment. This is fascinating. When you said the same thing that I asked you to repeat, the static came in again. So there's something about this that is
interesting.
significant. And I don't
Right. Well, the
know.
machine does not want us to have this said. All
Or
right, big brother and technobot. You can bog off for a minute. We
that's
just want to
funny.
like say something important.
I wasn't even thinking that. I was actually thinking more like that's a beautiful reminder of the need to clear the heart space. And
Ah,
so if I think we walk around with a lot of clutter and a lot of static energy in our hearts,
mm,
and to also include a process of cleansing and of soothing and of clearing that heart space to allow for the clarity of that connection. And the interesting thing was I knew exactly what you were saying both times, and I could feel the beauty of that. And yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I think that beaches are including an extra layer of information. And I also just want to point out this tapestry is my recognition of connection to beech forests. That this is my very
mm,
imperfect rendition of beech forests, that at some point in my life I was told and remembered that I am on some level a guardian spirit of a particular beech forest, and I want to say in the Ukraine,
mm,
which is where a quarter of my ancestry is
mm.
from. And so
So
the layers of beingness, we're not just the five finger. Even in our own self, we are layers and layers of reality.
that concept of interbeing, I really like that. It's the Buddhist monk that died recently, Thich Nhat.
Huh. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
he said he has coined the idea of interbeing. So yeah, we are interbeing with a much wider network of life. But I just feel like the beech trees are like, you need to say that again. So just like trees have mycelium of networks joining them and helping support each other, so the humans have threads of energetics that link our hearts. So it's the heart web.
Yes.
So we really need to attend to the energy in our heart.
Yes.
And it's only by attending to ourselves on our own heart can we then influence the world. So this is a concept that really helps me not to feel the burden of the weight of the world on my shoulders,
Hmm.
and not to be overwhelmed by it. It's just like all I can do is attend to my own world and my own heart. And if each of us can live that way, then collectively we can do an awful lot of good. And also decided we can just send out our love, send out our energy to another through their heart, and they might not
Yes.
even have to feel it consciously, or even someone that you're struggling with or that you really despise, you can send out,
Especially those
the love.
people.
especially those people. Well, that's metta, isn't it, as well? Like the Buddhist practice of metta, you send wellness to yourself, hope of wellness to another that you love, someone that you struggle with, and someone that you don't even know, and then the wider collective. So yeah,
Yes. Yes, in that order.
and you can only really send out metta properly if you've cleared the gunk in your own heart and attending to your own heart. So
And
yeah,
yet the
and
process of that is somehow fed by the interconnection. So you're talking about in your own life, in your own journey, first you heard the calling and you're following the calling, so something is drawing you forward from inside of you. And what then is the door opening where that really starts to come alive is when you were tending the land. And so there's the tending of the own heart, and yet there's also the outward tending, whether it's, I feel like this needs to be said, I'm being driven to say this, the mothering, the friendship, the worker to worker colleagueship in the office place or the workplace, that whatever it is that one is tending, that act of tenderness, which I think is the same word in our ancestry and English language, is somehow related to the cleaning out of the inner heart. That there's a reciprocity there of that.
I think so. And what's really coming for me to say is, like, when I started experimenting with showing my vulnerability, and I was really frightened to do it, what it actually did was gave permission to the other person to show theirs, and then we dropped into a deeper relationship.
Yes.
So I showed the in my heart, and they were touched by that, and they were willing then to open tenderness of their heart, and then yeah, deepening. So yeah, I think we're so taught to kind of be, we hold that kind of stuff in, and we're individuals. No, we're so much more than that. And yeah, even trying to let those people into our heart that we really have problems with. That's the challenge of compassion, isn't it? So and I watched a program recently with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu talk about joy. What is the source of joy? And they both said service, helping others. So yeah, that opens the heart of compassion to kind of be wanting to be helping others, even those that have views that we find abhorrent. Because there's a reason why they have those views, and they're human blood like each of us. And if we're always othering, like that person's awful, then that perpetuates the mess we're in. Yeah, and that interbeing as well. I think that is so important, that humans have given themselves this space of superiority, and we can dominate over, but really we can't. We're so interdependent and interbeing to the rest of life, that once we start realizing that, that's our way home to saving us all. Even if you might think those saving us.
And when you said that, so before addressing that you just said, I want to go back a half a minute to, because you lit something up for me in a way that I could see it and feel it more clearly. You talked about having the same blood. So if we think of, oh, that group of people or that particular person, they're the problem. You then said something about we all have the same blood, and all of a sudden I could feel the human body, the one human body, and how it's about inviting flow and inviting a sense of connection and continuity of that river that moves through. Like, I have a river in my body, you have a river in your body, that the heart pushes, the cycle of the heart pushes to all of the places. And then to think of that river of blood in the whole human family, and it helped me. Something about that, in a way that I can't even put words to, helped me. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. Yeah, I remember it struck me really young in age, because I spent some time in South Carolina, and I did, yeah, in Charleston, just outside Charleston, in a
Wow.
place called Goose Creek. So hello, any of those that might remember me.
Yeah.
But I was really struck by the racism there. I was like, oh, And
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, well, if we cut ourselves, we all bleed the same color. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what the color of our skin is, we all bleed the same color. So, and I
Yes.
think we all have, that's beautiful as well. We all have a heart. We all have a heart that pumps blood around our body.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the heart pumps that kind of love or hate out into the world. So, yeah, um,
So so our internet connection
that's
is
really
starting to
beautiful.
falter a little bit. You said the heart
Mm.
pumps out into the world. That was that what you just said?
Yeah, it kind of pumps the kind of, it can pump out love into the world or it can pump hate out into the world. So we have a
Yes, it's
choice. We can
yes.
either pump out love or we can pump out hate. And no
Yes.
matter what our circumstance, we have a choice how we want to be in the world. Um, and maybe I'm
And
saying
we
that from a really privileged place, but we all have a choice in every moment how we choose to be.
and actually, if you think about the other side of that, we also have a choice to call in love and to ask for love and help. If the corner of the human body where we are is hasn't been flushed lately, and the nutrition isn't reaching us, and the oxygen isn't reaching us, and the buildup of toxins are accumulating, we can also request that love and call in that love and invite that love and I am going to also say I'm speaking of a place from a place of privilege. My life is very privileged, and yet that seems so important to, in the same way that you invoke the intentions for your own life, set the intentions for your own life, to allow that the giving and the receiving, the giving and the receiving.
Yeah, that's really important, the calling in, because if there's lots of people giving out,
Yeah.
there's kind of a surplus, if there's people giving out, there's a surplus, it needs to go somewhere. So yeah, if all those people who need it can ask for it, then it can go to them aplenty. So um, yeah, and again, it's that cyclical thing, hot air goes to cold, doesn't it? If Is that right? Hot air rises and yeah. So is it hot
It
air
will
goes to cold?
it creates a circuit. It creates motion.
Mm,
It definitely a differential in temperature creates motion, whether that's in water or that's in air.
mm. So in the same way, we can kind of see the kind of heart flow and that kind of blood flow that happens in our bodies can, is the human body rather than this individual human body. And that goes out wider to the body of life, the web of life.
It
Um, so
it
yeah,
does. It does, and it speaks to your drinking apple cider and my making applesauce in appreciation and recognition of the gifts of the apple trees, and how,
yeah, right.
you know, the apple tree in this neighborhood was very glad when I asked my neighbors permission to collect the apples in front of their house between the parked car and the curb, just to say this is valuable, this is important, and they are
Mm,
some of the best apples I've ever tasted.
mm. Yeah, amazing. So the imagery that I'm getting there is like the apples have fallen, like they're discarded.
Yeah.
So there's lots, and but they still have value, and maybe there's maybe members of our society that have been discarded as having no value.
Yes.
Actually, everyone has value in some way,
And
to the
the
kind of the whole ecosystem of life, if you like.
everyone has value, even if you have to cut away the parts that are rotten or bruised, which is really what I do. So when I take these apples off of the street, I bathe them, which is in itself a ritual. And then
Mm,
I learned, I made a mistake the first year because I cut through the apple with a strong knife decisively, and I broke my own heart to see that I had cut through a little being. So, not an insect, another
ah,
type of invertebrate called an earwig. I don't even know what classification an earwig is, but she doesn't have 8 legs, she has more. I cut her in half and she was still alive and her babies were there, and I was so
mm,
sad, so upset. But I learned. I made that mistake once and I learned you don't cut through an organic apple. You take a paring knife and you gently pry it open. You make one slice not all the way into the
mm,
middle, somewhere near the middle, and then open the apple, and from there you get to meet all of the beings to whom that apple is their whole world. And so it's
ah,
either the apple
beautiful.
moth that's still in the larva form, or it's the earwig and sometimes the earwig family. And So what we have been able to do in that is actually take all of those little animals outside safely and put them back on the ground near the tree that they came from or into the worm compost bin at the allotment that we have. And so I have learned how to cut into an organic apple and to appreciate that.
Mm,
I mean, it's just such a miracle to see each and every one of these apples and pears that they are a world to a tiny creature that lives
mm,
inside of them.
beautiful. Yeah. That really, when I dig it, if I dug in the garden, you dig a, find half a worm, and you're like, I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so we employ what's called no dig in our garden. So we don't actually dig and turn the soil, we just put kind of more compost on top.
Right.
So we often cut, if we're clearing the bed, we cut the plant off and leave the root in the ground.
Yes.
And when I've cleared an area, I look, and the amount of life that comes out, like spiders and moths and beetles and
Yeah.
flies,
Yeah.
it's just like, wow, just from like a square meter of like soil, because
Yeah.
we're creating a life that enables all of the life to remain in that soil. So, I mean, healthy soil is the primary thing when it goes used to growing food, and we kind of think that's kind of forgotten. We're killing our soils with our commercial kind of level of farming.
Which
So
to get
yeah,
to back at the
that's
commercial level of farming is very much like saying we're all about the goats. We're 100% goat, and we're going to just stick with that. Where a commercial farm would say we're 100%
mm,
wheat. We're going to farm acres and acres of wheat, or we're going to farm acres and acres of. I live in California. I see this. Almonds, acres and acres of broccoli, monoculture. And then the monoculture
mm.
requires
But it's
the.
the challenges.
Go ahead.
It requires so much. So I was like really following the thought pattern, because around here there's a lot of dairy.
Hmm.
So I'm really observing how much resource goes into dairy.
Hmm.
So all the farmers at the moment, they're cutting their grass fields like crazy. So the animals have winter feed when they take them inside.
Hmm.
And many of the farms don't even let the cows out.
Hmm.
So they're harvesting the grass to take to the cows. It's like, well, shouldn't the cows be outside?
Hmm.
And then the amount of moving about. So the big lorries, the tractors are going to cut it. And then another thing comes to bale it. And then
Hmm.
another thing comes to kind of take the bales away. And then
Hmm.
the milk gets taken away to a central depot. And then it gets processed, and then it gets sent to all the supermarkets. And then people come to the supermarket, buy it. And then, so you
And
just
drive
think
home.
it's
Yeah.
it's gigantic.
Yeah.
But if we were to say to all the dairy farmers around here who've been doing it for generations, probably,
Hmm.
maybe not on this scale,
Hmm.
to say you can't do that anymore,
Hmm.
that's going to put loads of farmers out of business, and that's
Right.
going to affect their livelihood. So again, back to that kind of um, thing of like West English people going to Africa and say you need to cut down your goat herds.
Yeah.
For me, as a non-Welsh woman, to come in and say to the Welsh farmers, you need to change, because
Yeah.
that's not down well. So how do you, the question that I'm really sitting with the last week is, how do you enable that shift to happen?
Hmm.
How do you have those conversations to enable that to happen? And it's a really difficult question, because there's going
It.
to be so much resistance to a Welsh farmer being told you need to do this, when it's their whole
Right.
livelihood, and particularly if it's someone who's English, because of the whole history of, I
Well,
won't go into
sure.
it, but
And I don't know that there's an easy answer, and yet somehow it does circle back to setting your intentions, good and bad, and then allowing life to gift the opportunities for if it comes back to being in service to life, doesn't it? I had a situation several years ago where a neighbor across the street had a tree that was beloved to me, like all the trees in this neighborhood are, and yet I would notice and appreciate that tree every single day, and it was very tall. I could see it from our backyard, and they cut the tree down on my birthday, just coincidentally.
oh,
And I was completely brokenhearted and made a stink about it on Nextdoor, which is like Facebook only for your neighborhood. It's an online community space. I was brand new to Nextdoor and didn't realize that my comment was not anonymous, that I was actually geolocated onto my particular street. And so
Mm.
my neighbor saw me shaming her family publicly on Nextdoor and spoke up for herself. Like, I shouldn't have to have a committee of other people saying whether or not I can remove a tree from my property. This tree was causing alarm because branches were falling. We were worried that they were going to fall on our children. It's my right to decide whether a tree comes or goes in my property. And so I'm holding the both end of this, not the either or, that she's right. It's not any of my business. And yet I'm also allowed to have a relationship with a tree that's not on my yard,
Mm.
and to care and to say something when that tree's life is taken. And in the same way, you're in service to all life, right? And so you are noticing that this could be done better, differently. You have a responsibility to life to speak on behalf of all life, and yet also a responsibility to the five finger interdynamics between you and your Welsh neighbors who are indigenous to this land. And so you're coming in and you're not. And I just am going to wish you tenderness in your progress in that department, and just knowing that it's a major topic that isn't necessarily solvable quickly. You know, the whole industrialization of our food system. I think we're all, everywhere that we are, needing to find new pathways, and yet we're all, well, in the Western world, still in the supermarket paradigm.
And again, it comes back to that thing of like, I can only lead by example. I can only walk my talk. I can only attend to my own world. So, and also to be open to the conversation with those dairy farmers, and not to come in as an accusing person, but to go, well, these are the things that I notice. What do you think? What could be done?
And
Or could not be
could
done.
and could there be a partnership and a creation
Yeah,
and the creation of a new pathway? You know, I mean, that's, there's something to that too, of their
yeah,
creativity and your creativity coming together to, because you have to take your vegetables to market. You have a wholesaler. They have to take their dairy to market. They have a wholesaler. They have, they know what it means to be keeping the roof over their head and the food in the bellies of their family, and to be caring for their their family line. Uh, yeah, it just seems to me like there's a solution there that could be creatively explored as
yeah,
a,
for sure, for
yeah.
sure. And I think localization is a really important thing to look at, because our food is so globalized,
Yes.
um, that there's a lot of sheep here, that but how many Welsh people actually eat the Welsh meat? I don't know. I don't know the statistics on it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we live in a global food market.
Mm-hmm.
So an answer could be, that instead of these mega farms, you have farmers that have small dairies and they diversify into other things. So
Yeah.
that's one option, but I don't think it come from the outside. It needs to be a creative process that happens at a local community level.
And is
So
supported
what is
by,
that thing like, act local, think global, or is it
yeah.
that? Yeah, think global, act local.
Yes, and yet there's this relationship between you as the food producers, you as the ones that are working the land, tending the animals, tending the plants, and those who are living in the cities, and by necessity, your consumer, your clients, your customers. And so
Mm,
there's that
mm,
relationship, right? There's the problem solving all together. How do we do this more locally? What does that look like? How do we find that
mm.
middle path? Because we can't just
Yeah,
all say, okay, 1600, here we come again. We would just not
yeah,
know what to do
yeah.
with ourselves. Like, how would we do that? We wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, my father said to me when we first started out on this journey, "Why do you want to go back to the medieval times?" Because
Right.
I said, "Oh, I've got to have a pedal-powered washing machine." He was like, "Why do that?"
Yeah.
So it is kind of finding that middle road to kind of, I'm not against technology for sure, but I think I'm against technology being the only answer. I think it's melding the old with the new, using the old wisdom with the new wisdom. It's like the grandparents becoming the grandchildren becoming the teachers.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also having the wisdom of the elders. So it's this kind of interplay of the kind of modern and the old, but not just getting rid of the old just because we want progress. I think that doesn't make
Letting the
progress
progress
for
be,
progress sake's a bit nuts.
and just realizing that progress is actually that spiral, that circle, that the wheel that turns, and the spiral that spirals.
Yeah,
Progress circles back.
yeah,
So here we
yeah,
are.
because we're no,
Sorry, go ahead.
it's gone.
So here we are having this conversation. It's midday for me. It's getting on into mid evening, later evening for you. And I you had mentioned that the trees are telling you you need to get out of you need to let your doubt get out of the way, because you have been called upon and you have taken on the calling to be the ambassador and the voice, the translator, and the 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 loud horn. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. You're disseminating information and
So
wisdom.
yeah,
So
conduit.
the conduit. Do the trees have
Yeah.
any communications they want to bring through before we close? I know we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to make sure that if they came to this with a message, that we give them that opportunity. As I hold this
Okay.
acorn in my hand.
Mm. Well, as you've talked about an acorn, it's the oak here that calls himself the patriarch as a joke. Kind of almost gave me a story which told the story of the oak tree being very sad because people didn't come and sit under him and tell them their stories and have their gatherings and give honor and thanksgiving to the trees and have their solstice celebrations underneath it and forget that trees would answer and you could have conversation. So I think the trees would say, we'd really like to have a chat with you all. Um, and it may be hard to listen to start with, but we're quite chatty and we're really open and we're wise and they're not always kind. Sometimes I'm told off. Um, they aren't judgmental. Um, no, hang on a minute. That's me getting there now. So what do they want to say? So they would
Uh,
really like it. People just go and sit with the tree and just be with the tree, even if they can't hear them to start with. Build a relationship with one tree and just
with one
sit and
tree.
look at what the tree looks like and do it through the seasons. Get to know it, just by visual first, perhaps. So
Yeah.
yeah, each and every one to just choose a tree, any tree, or even a plant to just connect with over time, build a friendship with, and take an offering, introduce yourself at some point, and just see what happens. And if you think you're crazy, if you hear a voice in your head of a tree answering you, doesn't matter because your imagination is your pathway in. So if your imagination is telling you the tree's speaking to you, then it probably is. And it's that connection that we are life. So you are that tree. So even if you hear it in your own head, don't doubt that that is the tree because the tree
Yeah.
is you and you are the tree.
And younger human beings haven't forgotten this. So any children out there, I don't know that children would be listening to this podcast, but their parents will be. You can learn and remember that from children, that active imagination and that ability to sense and that ability to be in conversation with the spirits of the world around
Yeah.
us is not dampened or forgotten, and to allow that memory to come back in. Claire, I
Yeah.
want to just
Yeah,
mention
definitely.
the other calling that I have is to put together online. Well, they're courses in that they're online, but they're adventures to do with one's community that help re-village. So to help people connect with each other in a micro economy kind of a way. And one of the sessions that I've been guided to present, and I want to invite you in case you are interested in participating, is Year with a Tree. Year with a Tree,
Mm.
and that I am going to be asking other practitioners of various walks to offer teachings, maybe even like a 10 to 15 minute assignment. So here's for this month of the year with the tree, here's an activity. And you just mentioned having a picnic under the tree, and has absolutely been one of the
Mm,
activities that has come to mind. And for me, the trees that call for that the most are trees in car parks. So I don't know if you call them car park, parking lot, but if you're going
mm,
to go to that supermarket, very very often we plant trees in those asphalt environments, and those trees are calling out to be part of the community in a way that we slow down and greet them and have a meal under them. So that's an invitation. I'm just going to put that out there, float that to you.
beautiful. Mm, beautiful. Well, I already have there's an oak that I speak to that calls itself the picnic oak because it wants to have picnics underneath it all the time. So
Ah,
um yeah, so I have picnics occasionally with that tree. He's also the storyteller. So um yeah, and also the one that told me get in cold water to sort out your back problems. And on
oh,
day three of after it telling me that, I was like, okay. So healers can be trees can be great healers too. Um, they know what's good for us.
amazing, amazing.
But yeah, I would that would sounds a beautiful project.
Thank you. Wow. Well, I'm so excited that we've had this conversation. I was just wondering if there's anything else that's in your heart. Do you want to communicate?
Um, a moment of gratitude for the universe bringing us together and helping us share our passions and hopefully touching into the hearts of people who listen. So thank you, life. Thank you, Earth, for creating that possibility and answering both of our prayers.
Thank you, life. Thank you, earth. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and
And
stop the
thank you,
recording.
Christine, for
Oh, yeah. You're welcome.
I'm just
Thank
going
you,
to say
Claire.
thank you for answering the call of the trees. Oh, really
Ah,
good to speak.
yes,
And
likewise.